Hey guys, today I'm going to share my initial impressions on this BAK Revolver Tonneau cover. This is my 2024 GMC Sierra 2500 HD. It's got the short bed, of course, or the 6-foot 9-inch bed. Now, I installed this about a month ago, and I'll cut to those install highlights in just a bit. But I wanted to show some close-ups of the cover and give you an idea of how it actually looks once it's installed on the truck itself. And you can see it's got an ultra low profile. It really blends in with the top of the bed rails, almost like it's just one continuous plane, running side to side. It's got this real premium matte finish on the top, some really nice seals all the way around. So yeah, I'm really liking the way that this turned out. But for those interested in the install highlights, let me cut to that footage first, and then I'll come back and do a quick review on it and just share my initial impressions so far. Alright, so here's what the packaging looks like, what they ship it to you in. And I was actually a little concerned at first because one side of the box got banged up pretty bad in shipping. But I checked on the inside of the box on the rails that were touching that side of the box, and they're flawless. They weren't damaged, thankfully. And so it looks like they do a pretty good job packaging it from the factory to keep it safe in transit. But either way, I definitely recommend checking yours after delivery just to make sure, because there's nothing more disappointing than planning to install something one day and then you open it up and discover it's damaged. So definitely check yours ahead of time. Now, the instructions are printed, they are included in the box, and I'll just flip through them real quick. If you want to pause, feel free to do so. But they're really straightforward, and basically just like any tonneau cover, you've got the bulkhead seal up front. Then you've got the side rails that clamp to the top of your bed rails. And then you mount the actual cover once the rails are secured, and then make the final adjustments, and get everything squared up. So really nothing out of the ordinary on this install. The only thing that was just a little bit different on mine is that it came with a supplemental install sheet printed out. I'm not sure if this is just for GM trucks or what, but apparently some trucks have an abnormal variance on how wide they are, both at the bulkhead and the rear tailgate, which could impact, how this cover shuts, since it's got these teeth that lock into the side rails there. So the supplemental install sheet basically has you go through and measure at different locations between the bed rails to determine, how uniform your bed is front to back. And then if the calculations fall in a certain range, they advise you to use some extra shims that are included that basically step out the rails to make it more uniform. In my case, I did the measurements. Mine was spot on. There were no significant variances front to back, and so I did not need the shims. But it is nice that they give those to you in case you do. And then last, here's a quick look at all the different parts that you'll get with it. Of course, everything's labeled in the instructions. All right, now for the actual install itself. And by the way, guys, I'm not going to do a super long and detailed install video just for the sake of time. So this is just going to be the highlights. I'm thinking that if you're like me, you really just want to see the big picture to, real quickly get the hang of it. But that being said, as I was starting out on the install, I noticed that the rubber seals on the side rails, they had some kind of, manufacturing dust, almost like little white dots or particles that were kind of clinging to the rails, I guess through static maybe. And so I just took a soft brush and got all that cleaned off. Then the first part I installed was the bulkhead seal, and really the trickiest part of that is just knowing where to place it, how far forward or back. And on my truck, again, this is a 2024 GMC Sierra, the placement of that bulkhead was pretty much lined up with the edge closest to the rear as opposed to the edge closest to the cab. So it was right on the rearward flat portion just before the edge rolls off into the bed. And you can see I just cut a scrap piece of cardboard to use as a spacer to make sure that the placement of that seal was uniform across. And of course, what I didn't show is that I did first clean up the top of the bulkhead there with a degreaser, or you could use alcohol. I did that prior just to make sure there's good adhesion. Then after the seal is installed, I started on the driver's side mounting the rails, and it just basically butts up against the bulkhead, and then you secure it in 3 points along the bed rail, 12 inches or less on either end, and then one on the middle. I did pull out a tape measure. You're not going to see these clamps, when the cover's closed, but I wanted to make it uniform side to side. And then as far as tightening, I just snugged each clamp up first, and then I came back and did the final tightening, which the instructions advise as 10 foot-pounds of torque. I definitely didn't want to over tighten these, bend up something or strip threads, so I carefully followed that guideline. Then naturally I repeated the same steps on the passenger side, and once both rails were positioned and secured, I lifted the entire cover itself, of course still in the rolled position, onto the rails and then carefully unrolled it. And it took me a little bit of trial and error, lining it front to back and side to side. I even test closed the tailgate to make sure it was nice and snug. And after a few minutes, I was satisfied with the position and how it was opening and closing. Then I just had to fasten the cover down at the bulkhead to the side rails. They give you little knobs with attached nuts on the inside and some washers, 2 knobs on each side, 4 total. So I snugged those up and then actually went back and retested the open close a few more times just to make sure that it was in the right position. One little tip I'll mention is I was able to see inside the bed how much clearance I had side to side with the teeth. And then at the tailgate, I just gauged how tight it was in the closed position. I wanted mine tight enough that the seal, they give you a really nice seal, I wanted it tight enough that that seal would compress slightly against the tailgate, but not so tight that I'd be slamming the tailgate excessively hard, each time. And then the last step is just to add 4 bulb seal gaskets to the underside of the cover while it's in the rolled up position, so that if the cover were to make contact with your cab, then it's going to hit the bulb seals and instead of the cover itself, to protect your cab against any stray marks. And actually on mine, I found that even when I rolled it up all the way, it didn't get that close to the cab to begin with, but I went ahead and put those little bulb seals there in case it ever did. And really, that's it. I found the install to be pretty straightforward, maybe a little bit more complicated than a conventional soft roll-up cover, but there's really not a lot to it. I'll give you some close-up shots of where all the parts ended up aligning on my truck, and except for one bulkhead seal, all the others are factory installed, and they give you excess to cover everything really nicely there at the bulkhead to prevent, water from getting in. And the seals running down the bed rails, they seem to be really high quality. It's just got a real nice flexible material there that looks like it'll hold up, over the course of time. And I gotta say, it looks really good, especially when it's all closed up. So I'm really pleased with the way that it all turned out. But like I said earlier, before I published this video, I wanted to use the product for at least a month so that I could give some initial thoughts and offer up a quick review. So I've been using this for over a month now, and I'll just say up front that my biggest hesitation going with this specific cover was the price, which if you're not familiar with it already, it's just north of $1,000. I mean, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below, but for me, at least initially, the price seemed a little bit high. In the past, I've always done the more budget-friendly soft roll-up covers. The Tuxedo soft cover has been kind of my go-to, and that one sits above the bed rails. And that's the one I've used, I think, on the last 3 trucks. And I believe the price point on that's more in the $300 to $350 range tops. But this go round, I decided I wanted something that had a slimmer profile, something that was maybe a little bit more durable. And so that's why I settled on this BAK Revolver model. Again, it's just north of $1,000, which, like I said, seemed a bit pricey to me. But I will say, after installing it and then using it for the last month or so, I can at least appreciate the quality of the cover. I mean, everything from the seals to the material of the cover, both on the top and the underside for that matter, it does have a very high-end feel to it. So I'd imagine a lot of the cost probably went into the materials. It looks like something that will be much more durable compared to the soft roll-up covers that I've used on my previous trucks. You can see it looks really clean. It's probably one of the lowest profiles that you'll get with a tonneau cover. In fact, if you're not paying attention, you might not even notice it on the truck, especially with how tall the beds are on these trucks. So I'd say if you're looking for a cover that's ultra low profile, then this is definitely a good choice. Now let's talk about the ease of rolling the cover up. And again, I came from years of using the cheaper soft roll-up covers on my previous trucks. And with those, I pretty much had to roll them up from inside the bed, in the middle, to roll it up and make it straight and tight. But I will say with the Revolver cover here, really you can do it from either side because it's more rigid. You know, it stays square and tight as you roll it up. The only downside I can think to mention is that because the cover itself is thicker, when it rolls up, you've got a, you can see a larger radius here. Maybe it sticks up about a third of the cab height. So I don't think there's really any blockage in terms of visibility when you're looking out the rear window of your truck, but it is more prominent when it's rolled up compared to a soft cover. And I mean, on that note, I certainly could have gone with one of those retractable covers that would roll up underneath the bed rails, and sit hidden underneath. But what I don't like about those personally is that then you lose all that space in your bed permanently, since there's a giant canister for it to roll up into with those retractable covers. Whereas with this Revolver cover, you don't lose that space in your bed when it's all closed up. And I mean, if I ever do any fifth wheel or gooseneck towing, when the cover is rolled up, it's going to be completely out of the way. It's got really nice tie downs to keep it secure while you're driving in that rolled up position. And so, yeah, I think it's very functional overall. As far as closing the cover, I think it's a good bit easier compared to a conventional soft cover. Basically, you just get it started and then it'll pretty much unroll itself out. You just press down on the back strip here to engage the teeth. And then front to back, it's secure, which is another major selling point on this cover. If you compare this with a soft cover, like I've used in the past, typically that soft cover is just Velcroed along the sides. And of course, someone could easily, peel that Velcro off, reach in your bed, and, get access. Whereas this Revolver model, it's way more secure in that it has those teeth that lock in all the way down the sides. And so on that, let me answer the question, how well does the cover lock, with the teeth in terms of doing it automatically, right? Well, on mine, I've noticed one little bulge, if I'm being picky, on the driver's side near the cab. It's like one little section of the cover, just a few inches, that doesn't want to lay as flat. And so I've found so far, at least over the first month of ownership, that I've had to manually come back each time that I close the cover and press down right here in this spot, and then it locks into the teeth. I can hear it click. I'm guessing that maybe the material had a little bit of a memory while it was rolled up in the box before I installed it, and so I'm hoping that over time it'll lay flat better. But that's the only issue I've had on mine so far. I even checked underneath to make sure that nothing's impairing the cover on the underside, and it's completely free. So like I said, I wonder if it's just the material's getting accustomed of being unrolled and laying flat. And hopefully it'll work out that little bulge over time. Then the other big question that I had on this cover is, how well does it keep the rain and the elements out, right? I mean, if you've got something stored in your bed that you don't want to get wet, how well does this cover perform? And I've only gotten to try it out a few times in full-on rain, heavier rain. But what I've found is, at least so far, there's been zero leakage along the bulkhead and the sides. Really, the only place that I can find water getting in is by the tailgate, which I believe is just water coming in through the sides of the tailgate itself, because of course that's not sealed up. I mean, I could get one of those tailgate seals if I wanted and seal up the tailgate itself, but I'm not that concerned about a few drops coming in at the rear. So from a rain and weather standpoint, I think it does as good of a job, if not better, compared to a conventional soft roll-up cover. I remember I had a flush mount retractable cover on a previous truck years ago, and I recall it was a real challenge to keep the rain out along the sides, being a flush mount cover. But on this Revolver cover here with the seal running the full length of the sides, it really covers that entire gap very well, and so it definitely keeps your stuff dry inside. All right, well, last question. Would I buy it all over again? Would I buy this BAK Revolver Tonneau cover all over again? And guys, remember, I don't typically spend this much on a Tonneau cover. I mean, this was a splurge for me coming from the $300 soft roll-up covers that I've had on my previous trucks. But I gotta say, after using it, feeling all the materials and seeing it up close, it definitely has a high-end, high-quality feel to it. So I think I understand more the price premium on it. So right now I'd say it's worth it if you're looking for a slimmer profile, something that's more secure along the edges, yet you don't want a retractable style that rolls into a canister. You don't want to lose that space in your bed. I mean, I think in some ways this Revolver cover is kind of the best of both worlds. So for me personally, I'd buy it all over again. But guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll try to come back with a long-term update, perhaps 6 or 12 months down the road, and share how it's held up over time. But in the meantime, do me a favor, if you're interested in buying this cover, I'll include affiliate links in the description below and pin a comment with them. So I appreciate you using those to help support the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.